And here we are. Frost Decay has had a rough patch in the last few patches. But fret not, because 8.2 is treating Frost Decays very nice, and if you wanted to know if Frost Decay is a good spec to play in 8.2, then here is my first impression. Well, I say first impression, but I played a bit in the past few days, and honestly, I didn't get to do anything more than some normal raiding and some lower keys. Even so, I feel really good about playing Frost Decay, and without further ado, let's talk about the changes. Previous to 8.2, the main build Frost had revolved around Breath of Sindragosa, which is still a very good talent and still the main build so far, as far as the beginnings of the patch is concerned. Among the many issues the build had, there was a lot of downtime, and you felt very resource starved at points, so the majority of the changes came in to fix those aspects, among others. So first, Runic Empowerment has been buffed. Previously, it had a 1.5% chance per runic power to generate a rune instantly. Now it has a 2% chance. What this means is that the total amount of procs has been increased by 33%, which, considering how fast Frost blasts through runic power, is a decent, if not a very significant change. Simply thinking about this one change makes sense and empowers the breath window significantly. Think about it like this: breath consumes 16 runic power per second, and if we consider that you would be able to keep up breath for at least 20 seconds, usually it's even more with proper gear, practice and traits, and you would end up spending more than 300 runic power, meaning you would generate around 6 runes for its duration as opposed to 4.5. Moreover, when you pop and drop breath, you get 2 runes each time. So with this in mind, the base damage of breath was nerfed a bit to make it competitive with the other options on the row, and the tooltip reflects better its mechanic when fighting multiple targets, in that secondary targets take less damage. On the topic of runic power generation, Frost Fever was buffed to generate runic power 30% more often, but with diminishing returns beyond the first target. Meaning that when fighting large packs, you would reach a cap where Frost Fever will stop generating bonus runic power. Still, way better in single target. Killing Machine has had its number of procs increased to 4.5 per minute, up from 1.5. This is a very abstract change since it takes into consideration you playing your rotation perfectly, so the best way to put it is that you will get 3 times as many Killing Machine procs as you did before. Although this is still not that accurate either, because of the multitude of buffs your resource generation has got, not to mention further gear scaling later down the patch. Frost Strike has received an overall 4% extra damage buff based off of your attack power as well, because not only did the spec have resource issues, it was just not doing optimal damage. The last change, and one of the biggest, is the icecap buff, where Frost Strike, Frost Scythe and Obliterate crits reduce the remaining cooldown of Pillar of Frost by 3 seconds instead of 1. This talent puts it in a competitive spot with Breath of Sindragosa, of course based off of the type of encounter you are doing. With proper crit levels, you could essentially keep Pillar uptime 100%. It's not possible for me at this point since I am still lacking gear. I did, however, had a session where I had 2 or 3 back-to-back Pillars, but that was too RNG-ish to happen every time. I expect that if I keep stacking crit and haste, as the Sims would suggest, I would get 100% uptime on Pillar of Frost. Especially for someone that will main Frost, this will be true, considering you will have the stats, traits and essences needed to pull this off. The video is a first impression, so I won't be talking about the best talent builds. Not to mention Season 3 is not out, so there's hardly any relevant testing that we can do. Reaping will no longer be a factor, but intense single target might be. Speculations aside, there is a general accepted build in the Death Knight Discord community, and there seem to be only 3 rows of talents that can change, which is more than we can say about half the specs in the game already. Level 60 will differ, where you take Frozen Pulse for single target and Frost Scythe for AoE. This doesn't mean rating or M+, just what you feel like you need to do. Level 90 row seems to be more or less in the same state as 8.1.5. Frostworm's Fury is an amazing cooldown for AoE and even single target if used properly. And by used properly, I mean pair it nicely with either Pillar of Frost or Icy Citadel, the Azerite trait. This is not something set in stone because you want to think of Frostworm's Fury as a snapshot ability. You want to use it at the highest amount of strength and attack power, and that can change based on your gear. The last row is where we can mix and match. Currently, Breath of Sindragosa is the de facto option. It's a much smoother playstyle, and honestly, it's the only skill Frost Decays have to effectively spend runic power, single target but mostly AoE, and I'll come back to that. Obliteration is simming poorly, but not too far behind Breath. This is important in a specific playstyle that also applies to icecap. Breath is going to be a better option always if you can properly use it close to on cooldown paired with Pillar and Empowered Rune Weapon. Every time you hold on to Breath because there's a boss phase you have downtime for, or if your tank made some awkward pulls, icecap and or obliteration pulls slightly ahead. This is subjective but mathematically reflective of this. Further testing needed. And speaking of icecap, I personally like the talent and the implications it has on the build. It can also change your Azerite setup, which is never a bad thing to add more variety. As opposed to Breath, you won't have any more downtime to icecap than you have by default with Breath of Sindragosa. And there isn't a major thing to pair it with that you would have to withhold Pillar of Frost for. It's possibly a better build for unpredictable fights and maybe people just getting into Frost Decay for the first time. My only issue with it is that we lose Breath as a runic spender, and I really dislike Frost Strike in AoE situations. I've played with both builds and averaged the same DPS in Mythic Plus, but again, take these things with a grain of salt. In terms of traits, the Breath build seems to work nicely with Treacherous Covenant, which won't be an option once the new raid starts, but also with Icy Citadel and Frozen Tempest, which coincidentally are the best traits for Mythic Plus as well. Icecap gives you the option to run Frostwhelp Indignation. Considering you'll have many more Pillars of Frost, this trait scales amazing and leaves you the option to forsake some mastery in favor of crit, which is probably the best out for this build and Frost in general. As far as essences go, there are still speculations, but judging the theory in front of us, Memory of Lucid Dream and Blood of the Enemy seem to synergize the best based off of their functionality with resource generation and critical strike. Not unlike the synergy between the subscribe button and the enable notification button. If you like these smooth transitions, then you will love the smooth transition from being a subscriber to actually getting our videos in your feed. Click the bell now. In the little time I had to play with Frost, I can talk a bit about its performance. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a big key pusher or a mythic creator, but I did run through all the specs in 8.1, through all the content, so at the very least, I have a solid frame of reference. Not to mention, I can compare it a bit with Frost in 8.1.5, which was... maybe not the best, lol. Frost Decay feels a bit like Enhancement Shaman, in that you can dish out a decent high amount of AoE damage that doesn't raise or drop. It's consistent, and so far I was challenging the Havoc Demon Hunter I was running with. Considering my gear is pretty shit and still have bad trinkets, traits and essences, I can see this spec doing crazy things once it has proper gear. If you run content where you have a long uptime on your target or target, the Breath build will start to pull ahead, as long as you can also increase the uptime of your Breath windows reliably. If the content is more of a farm nature or you're running with pugs, you might find Icecap to be more reliable, but it does seem to be a bit more gear reliant as well than Breath of Sindragosa, so keep that in mind. I don't have strong feelings for Obliteration, and so far seems to be the worst performing talent on the row. Not by much, mind you. So if you like it and you're not confident on pulling off proper Breath of Sindragosas, then go for it. In raids, the mobility will still be a major issue. Anytime you're away from your target, it feels like shit! Uptime is pretty much mandatory with both Icecap and Breath. Fights that have you move around will make Wraith Walk mandatory if it wasn't already. The opposite is true as well. If you can actually stick to the boss, you will wreck Major face. Considering Season 3 will change the Mythic Plus scene, I feel Frost can do great things. Not just because of the single target requirements, because Frost deals with AoE very smoothly. In the new raid, however, I'm not sure. We need proper testing with the encounters, plus people will figure out the playstyle after they run through the bosses a few times. Overall, my impressions of Frost left me, well, impressed. I did go in with low expectations, but seeing how competitive my performance was with terrible gear was a pleasant sight. There's still much to be said, so stay tuned, and also check the Acarus Discord channel where the dedicated DKs theorycraft and test all the things I cannot get my hands on. Depending on when you watch this, our Frost DK guide might not be up, but fear not, because we have you covered with our 8.2 guide that runs you through all the types of content that you can do while waiting for the Frost DK to be up. Shout out to our patrons for their love and the fact that they're still here. No, really, many thanks guys. And if you want to support our channel and become a Patreon, check the details down below. Summer is the best time to take your clothes off. Well, second best. But how about when you put them back on, you get to put them in style with our Marcelian&Online Warcraft branded merch. Yep, we got t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and mugs for you to take out and show off your Warcraft loyalties down in our official Teespring below. Thanks for watching the video and have an awesome day.
Never thought of me.